Hey guys, I'd like to today talk with you about the 10th plague, the most terrible of them all. It's also called the Passover. The Passover, we'll talk about why it's called that. This comes from Exodus chapter 12. You can read that chapter to read all about this plague, the preparation for it. Let me first introduce the Passover lamb, and then we'll talk about how Christ identifies himself with the Passover lamb in the New Testament. In Exodus chapter 12 and verse 3, they were supposed to take a lamb into their house on the 10th day of the first month. Just take it into the house, not kill it on the 10th day, but just take it in. They were to have one lamb per household. And God said, well, if it was too much for your small family, maybe you could invite another small family to eat with you. But each family, he said, should have one lamb that they were eating together. It should be an unblemished male. It could be from the sheep or the goats, but it had to be without spot, a perfect lamb. They were to kill the lamb at twilight on the 14th of the month. So they took it into their house on the 10th day of the month, and they killed it on the 14th day of the month. They had it in their house for 4 days. Isn't that interesting? And twilight actually is the very end of that 14th day. According to the way the Jews reckon time, they would have a new day. The 15th day was beginning at this point. As the sun goes down on the 14th day, that began their next day. And so they killed it, and they would eat it then on the 15th day of the month. They were to break no bone in this lamb. According to chapter 12 and verse 46, they had to be careful not to break any bone. They were to put the blood of the lamb around the door. So you see on both sides of the door, on the door posts, and above the door, on the lintel of the door, they were to just paint it with blood. They were to eat this with unleavened bread. So they would cook this entire lamb, including its entrails and everything. They would just roast this entire lamb. They would eat it, and they would eat it also with unleavened bread because they wouldn't have time to let the bread rise with leaven. They were to eat in haste. So hasty were they that God said in chapter 12 and verse 11, "You shall eat it with a belt on your waist, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. So you shall eat it in haste." It is the Lord's Passover. Something was going to quickly happen. And he says in verse 13, "The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. And the plague shall not be on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt." So that blood then became a sign around their door, a protection for them. When the God went through Egypt and killed the firstborn of men and animals, he would not touch the Israelites who were faithful and obedient to have this blood painted around their doorways. Now, Jesus is our Passover. 1 Corinthians 5 verse 7 says, "Indeed, Christ, our Passover, was sacrificed for us." And so the New Testament makes a connection between Jesus, the Lamb of God, and the Lamb of the Passover that the Israelites observed throughout their generations. Jesus entered into Jerusalem 5 days before the Passover. John chapter 12 and verse 1 says that Jesus came to Bethany, which is just outside of Jerusalem. He spent the night there. So he came 6 days before the Passover. He spent the night, and then on the 5th day, 5 days before the Passover, he entered into Jerusalem. We call that Palm Sunday, where the people laid the palm branches down on the ground, and Jesus rode into town on the back of a donkey. Now, this is like Jesus, the Lamb of God, coming into the house of Israel, and he would stay there until his death. Jesus, as far as we can understand, was crucified on Passover. And so I believe it was probably on a Wednesday night, according to our way of reckoning time, that the disciples would have prepared the Passover to eat together with Jesus. They went into that upper room and they ate it that night together. And so this is also when Jesus instituted the Lord's Supper, which reflects some of those things that the Israelites observed with the Passover. So Jesus was crucified on that day. He was in the house for those 5 days and then crucified. Hebrews chapter 9, verses 13 and 14 say, Hebrews 9, verse 13 and 14, "For if the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of a heifer, sprinkling the unclean, sanctifies for the purifying of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living God?" Christ offered himself without spot. He's about 33 years old when he died, in the prime of his life, and he was a perfect sacrifice. John 19 makes a point very clearly that no bone was broken. The soldiers went and asked if they could go hurry up the deaths of those 3 men that were on the crosses. They went and they broke the legs of the 2 thieves that were on either side of Christ, but when they came to Christ, he was already dead. They stuck a spear in his side, blood and water came out, and they realized he's dead. They did not break any bones on his body, and it says it fulfilled this verse back in Exodus chapter 12 and verse 46. Jesus was the one lamb, too, that was sacrificed for all the household of God. In Hebrews chapter 7 and verse 26, Hebrews chapter 7 and verse 26, it says here, "For such a high priest was fitting for us, who is holy, harmless, undefiled, separate from sinners, and has become higher than the heavens, who does not need daily, as those high priests, to offer up sacrifices, first for his own sins and then for the people's, for he did once for all when he offered up himself." Once and for all, one lamb for the entire world. And we remember his body and his blood when we look back to Christ. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 18 and 19, it says, "Knowing that you were not redeemed with corruptible things like silver or gold from your aimless conduct received by tradition from your fathers, but you were redeemed with this, with the precious blood of Christ, as of a lamb without blemish and without spot." And folks, we eat dressed to leave. Today we take the Lord's Supper. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 speaks to this Lord's Supper, and he says, in eating the bread and drinking the cup, which represents the blood of Christ, we're eating and drinking, looking forward to our final deliverance, to the coming of the Lord. And so Jesus, as the Israelites painted around their doorway the blood of the Lamb, we are saved today by the blood of Christ, the blood that was shed on the cross. And we look to Jesus as our Passover lamb, that when his blood is applied to us, God will pass over us in that great judgment that is coming. God bless you in your walk with him.